So we'll be looking at remake, but there are other forms of literature which are also adapted quite regularly. In fact, uh, many of them are very, very popular as such in terms of adaptation and its success ratio. So we'll look at some of those forms of literature. So today's our topic will be adaptations from other sources. We will look at some of the sources which are not considered a very, very huge literary sources apart from poetry. Okay. But they are there very much there in almost all literature department, and they have been adapted from the very inception of cinema. Okay. So let's begin uh, today's discussion. We start with the idea of poem, adaptation from poem. Now, if we think carefully, we'll find very, very few films which are actually directly adapted from the poems. Yeah, there are some films adapted from the epics, okay, or myths, but the kind of poetry we normally talk about in terms of literature, okay, that is literary poems, sonnets, and all, or longer versions of those poems, okay, heroic couplets and blank verse. These poems are actually very minimal in the sense of adaptation, but um, they are not completely absent. There are good number of poems adapted for screen. So now, from the perspective of literary definitions, a poem is a piece of writing in which the words are chosen for their beauty and sound and are carefully arranged, often in short lines which rhyme. So we normally expect that poem is something that's singable, there is rhyming, and they appear what we call beautiful when we read poems. Okay. And apart from that, most of these poems deal with some very, very interesting and important subjects, including various forms of romance. One of the most important poets in the history of literature, William Wordsworth, defines poem as the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. And this is a very, very interesting definition in the sense that uh, is poetry completely spontaneous? Okay, because this is what Wordsworth used to believe. And if we go by Wordsworth definition, then probably the idea that adaptation from the poems will have a kind of drastic difference in the sense of its creation. When we try to adapt a poem into a movie, we must remember that a movie can never be spontaneous. It is always well planned and executed form of art. Probably movies are the second most well planned forms of what we call artistic or certain form of literary creation. I would put first on first position. I'd put advertisements, because advertisements also have a kind of background research before they start developing their argument. In case of cinema also, there are plannings at various levels, right from conceptualizing idea to developing a story to developing script writing, and then uh, identifying right type of characters and technicians, the schedule of the shoot, and then post production time, everything in nowadays, almost everything is happening in a kind of corporate level of planning. Okay, so cinema, when we are thinking in terms of adaptation, can never be as spontaneous as a poetry be, even if the poetry is what we call planned outcome, but it can never be as planned as the cinema. So in the process of making film, okay, you will have a lot of possibilities of working on the poem that you have selected. Poem is primarily a single artist expression. Okay. That is, I haven't seen a poem that is written by more than one poet simultaneously. Ha. We know of ideas which are dealt with different poets from different perspectives, but they will create different poems. So, poem is primarily a single artist expression, while in order to make a movie, there is an ensemble of cast, and all of them specialize in their own field of expertise. Cast not only in the sense of actors, but also in the sense of technicians. So, film could never be a single person's uh, work. Of course, we assign the agency of the film to the director, but director alone cannot make or visualize the film as it is. Okay. So that process that you want to adapt a poem, okay, again, a director has a vision of adapting a particular poem into a film, but that vision also requires support of technicians and actors that will make that vision a reality. Unlike poems, the movies are not normally in rhyming schemes. There are few films which are deliberately made into uh, rhymes. So almost all the dialogues rhyme, but they are like mm, very, very few, very minimal in number. But almost majority of the poems, and in fact many people believe that if it is not rhyming, then it's not a poem. Okay. So that is again a issue related with the form. Okay, we talked about formal issue. Poetry has a specific form, and we identify it as a poetry because it has that form. When we are making a film from it, we are basically changing that form. Okay, so we talked about Iliad the other day. Ultimately, every adaptation from a poem is constrained by the director's interpretation and vision. How the director is reading that poem, what director thinks as the major theme of the poem, or the theme that the director wants to make major for his adaptation, for her adaptation. So the director's and individual's interpretation and an individual's vision, it's something that affects the entire reading of the poem in the case of developing it into a script or into a film. At the same time, the technical and creative limitations also affect the final output of the poetic adaptation. Okay, because Plato said the poets are of imagination all uh, composed. So there are a lot of what we call vivid imaginations. Okay, and they may lead you to different parts of the world, different parts of the reality, different dimensions of the world and reality. Okay, like I personally love poetry of Samuel Taylor Coleridge. but I believe that nobody would try to convert any of his poem into a film. Though he was very vivid, was very detailed, and he was dealing with uh, a very very important and very relevant themes in his poems. But the way he used to create that what we call imagery is difficult even uh, at the present level standards. And that imagery look or will look good only in poem. Probably if you recreate the same thing on screen, you may not have that impact. So the kind of output and kind of emotional response that poetry could generate, uh, there is very minimal chance that similar emotions or emotional response could be generated by its adaptation. But yet, many people have tried to adapt poetry into the film. I'll give you one of the earliest example. This is La Inferno, which was made in 1911. And if I'm not wrong, this you'll find the movie on this on YouTube. Now, this film was made in 1911. So, like, cinema was in its infancy. And even at that time, the directors were kind of fascinated by literary items. And here, the director selected one of the most important poetry by Dante Alighieri, which was also called Inferno. Now, in this specific movie, it is silent. So the issues related with language, what we call linguistic issues of adaptation. See, poetry is ultimately verbal. There is language involved. And when you are watching this film, there is no language involved except the visual communication. So you have to completely depend on visual language. So your uh, language is completely different now. But what is interesting is what this director did in terms of adapting this particular poem into visual form. He makes it a kind of universal uh, work of art, because in order to see and enjoy that work of art, you need not to learn or use the language. If you wanted to read Dante or Dante's poems, okay, you need to know the language in which Dante was writing. But when that poem is converted into the film, and the film is a silent film, you don't have language. So anybody can watch that film anywhere and can see and imagine about Dante's imagination. So this particular film followed the narrative structure of the poem, but all the poetic elements were found missing because there was no language. So, a lot of what we call metaphorization and creative uses that was originally there in the poem are removed, and instead of that, uh, the director tried to uh, create a kind of visual representation of Inferno. There is a character who is going through various stages of Inferno, and that particular character uh, sees how the Inferno is built and what kind of punishments are there. So that is visually available to the audience. Okay, but that poetic elements for which Alighieri's Inferno was popular, that is missing. Okay, Similarly, one more important form of adaptation, we had this question yesterday also, that when we are adapting from biographies or autobiographies or some real life events, then uh, how do we deal with it? And so instead of see, we are in social science, we basically don't what we call impose the idea, we don't prescribe, we describe. So our methods, our theories, our approaches come from description, that how people are doing it, how a specific director or how particular artist is doing this particular thing. Based on that, we will develop a theory. So yes, the same film we were talking about yesterday, Bhag Milkha Bhag, okay, which is a 2013 film directed by Rakesh Om Prakash Mehra, and it was based on the life of Milkha Singh, the legendary athlete and Olympian. Now, before making Bhag Milkha Bhag, Rakesh Om Prakash Mehra made three films. Okay. My personal approach to Bhag Milka Bhag, when the movie got released, I had certain expectation from the movie, because I am a big fan of Rakesh Om Prakash Mehra's first three films. He made three films. First was Ux, Amitabh Bachchan and Manoj Bajpayee. Second was Rang De Basanti, and third one was uh, Delhi 6. Now, why I was interested in Bhag Milkha Bhag was the thematic continuity in the first three films made by Rakesh Om Prakash Mehra. I've actually written an article on first three films of Rakesh Om Prakash Mehra, because all these three films are basically dealing with the representation of good and evil from three different perspectives. And when Bhag Milkha Bhag was releasing, I was concerned with this idea that how would Rakesh Om Prakash Mehra maintain his thematic continuity in this film, because this is primarily a biography. So, will he be able to bring that idea of good and evil in the movie? The way he has weaved that idea of good and evil in first three films. Philosophically, they were very accurate and very well weaved into some other type of narratives. They are not basically dictating about good and evil in any of those three films. And I was little disappointed. No doubt the film was very good, okay, and we can still watch it if it comes on television, but I was little disappointed because that idea of good and evil was not well what we call presented. While there was a scope in the movie, but he did not present, mm, because he wanted to concentrate better on uh, the idea, that is the life of Milkha Singh. So this was primarily a sport drama, because we are basically witnessing the growth, development, and becoming a kind of world class athlete. Okay, we are looking at those aspects of one particular character. So we were, and those sport sequences again were shot very effectively. Okay, so you will feel that you are actually watching Olympic events. But in spite of it being sport drama, the film also includes the issues, that is socio-political issues related with the idea of partition, and as we were saying yesterday, that the way this aspect of partition, how it has affected the life and the personality of Milkha Singh. So that is something that this becomes a kind of documentary uh, for everyone who were refugees uh, shifting from Pakistan to India, and the kind of hardships they have been through, okay, in that phase of their life. Okay, so that documentation was so well done that you will understand the situation in which the person like Milkha Singh grew up. So that's where uh, one interesting thing, like, even if there is some sort of fantasy involved, some sort of fiction involved, okay, but that becomes a necessity because as a director, you will have to create a narrative that audience likes to watch. If you are simply documenting the life of a person without giving kind of conflicts and narrative ups and downs, then your audience will not accept it as a film. If you simply wanted to document the life of a person, you make a documentary. You're making a feature film. That means you'll have to bring in the features of feature film, and that those features were there in Bag Milkha Bag. It has amazing music, very good acting by almost all the actors in the movie, and the film was very well edited. I personally like Rakesh Om Prakash Mehra for this thing, that his editing skills, whosoever editor he's working with, but uh, he is excellent in creating that narrative out of editing. I normally say in my film studies classes that film is actually made on editing table. So what you shoot, what you do, everything is fine. But how you connect them together, how you put them together to develop a narrative, that's where your actual film is being prepared. And in this film also, you find amazing editing. Similarly, another such story, but this story is not uh, a kind of life story. Okay, this story is called 127 Hours, which was made by Danny Boyle, and this film was done, like, made by Danny Boyle immediately after Slumdog Millionaire. Okay. 127 Hours, released in 2010 by British director Danny Boyle, was based on a real life survival story of Aaron Redstone. So he went on a kind of adventure. So actual movie begins when he leaves his home for this adventure. He was on his small bike, and he was going into this mountainous area, and then he falls into a kind of ridge, and where he unfortunately stuck himself between a rock and a mountain. Basically, there's a small rock, and there's a mountain, and his hand got stuck between these two places, and he is unable to move out. And he had, like, he tried everything. He got stuck there for 127 hours. You can count how many days are there. And actually his survival uh, was even more painful. He had nail cutter in his bag. So in the nail cutter there is small knife. So actually used that knife, and he cut his own hand with the help of that knife, and he saves himself. So after this incident, and when he is completely fine, Aaron Renstone wrote a book about his experience. That book is called Between a Rock and a Hard Place. And this specific film is based on that book. Okay. And again, see, what was interesting in this film is there is only one character. In initial sequences when he's leaving home and um, all those, like you find few people, but the moment he gets stuck into this particular reach, he is the only one there, and you are basically seeing his struggle to save his own self. And the entire movie is about that struggle. So the biggest challenge mm, that I could see is that how can you create a narrative without characters, okay, that will appeal to the audience and that would expect the audience to stay there for 2.5 hours. Hmm. So that's where, see, in 127 hours, he initially had some food, he had some water, but gradually everything is over, and still there is no hope that anyone will come and save him. See, imagine someone taking a decision of cutting his own hand by rough, what we call knife of nail cutter. Okay, that could have been uh, such a what we call difficult decision to take for anybody. But that is the kind of desperation that he had to take that decision in. So now here again, the film's most important feature was its music. There were few songs like playing in the background and the background music. And again, this is second time Danny Boyle uh, collaborated with A.R. Rahman. Okay. So this film also um, was given music composed by A.R. Rahman. Plus, in this movie, Danny Boyle also thanks Anurag Kashyap. Okay, because in the movie Devdas or Devdi, sorry, not Devdas, Anurag Kashyap used a particular way of framing where because Anurag Kashyap is converting Devdi into three stories. There's a story of um, Paro, there's a story of Chanda, and there's a story of Dev. So there are three simultaneous stories going on. So there are a lot of sequences where all three of them or two of them are side by side on the same screen. You see two frames or three frames in one frame. So similar technique of presenting actions on screen was used by Danny Boyle in this film, and for which he thanked Anurag Kashyap because he got that idea from Anurag Kashyap. Okay. So this is again a kind of what we call story where there is very limited narrativity, there is very limited conflict involved, and to develop a kind of what we call 2 hour narrative from it that can hold the attention of the audience, that itself is a challenge. Okay. And so there is a lot of flashback in this movie. Okay, that he is reimagining his past life, he's thinking about his what we call other close relatives or mm, and all that thing. So again, whether he has actually written about his what we call past life in the book or not, that's a different question. Okay. But it is adapted into the film, and that makes film interesting. Like there are certain sorts of conflicts related with his past life and his present situation, and that changes or that makes the narrative a kind of attractive narrative. Similarly, one more film, and I think most of you must have seen this film because it is one of the very, very popular films, The Wolf of Wall Street. and it's made by Martin Scorsese. Okay. It is an American film released in 2013, and The Wolf of Wall Street was based on the life of Jordan Belfort. Okay. So, and in fact, this film is again based on a kind of biographical or a memoir of Jordan Belfort that he has written after he comes out of all his issues, drug problems, and all, and then he writes his survival story. So, based on what Belfort has written about himself, Scorsese develops the script, and the film has a lot of material which is directly associated with what we call typical Hollywood film, the kind of American dream that Hollywood shows to the world. Okay. That American dream is so well captured in the film. Okay. And that's where the film becomes interesting as well as appealing. Plus, there are some very, very good actors in the movie, like you had Leonardo DiCaprio, who played the lead. He played the role of Jordan Belfort, and then he gets into drugs and all the other issues. He becomes a kind of tycoon in the sense, the way he managed the share market, and he develops the entire uh, industry for that. But at certain stage, the kind of what we call illegal activities that they were doing with the idea of share market was disclosed, um, and then he got arrested and all those issues. But ultimately, Jordan Belfort comes back, he writes about it, and that is adapted into the film. And in fact, in the last scene of the film, Jordan Belfort himself was there. If some of you remember, last scene, uh, the real Jordan Belfort comes as a kind of what we call marketing guru, and then he selects one member from the audience and tells him, "Sell me this pen." Okay, so that member of the audience was Jordan Belfort himself. Okay. So there is now a kind of intertextuality with the real life. Okay. Because the movies were actually made from real life. But one thing we need to understand that however real life or realism we are picking up for our movies, we don't have to present it in realistic sense. Rather, we require certain level of imagination and certain level of romanticism, and certain what we call narrativity that will make a film into something that is digestible and something that is appreciated by the audience. If we simply give uh, the what we call description of somebody's life in the form of a film, it will not um, create the kind of response that we expect from the audience. One more such kind of realistic adaptation. Here we will talk about the events. The previous slide we were talking about the individuals. Some individuals, what we call lives, have been adapted into film. Now we are looking at movies which are basically uh, capturing some real life events in the movies. The first one is Cinderellas List. I believe all of you must have seen this movie. It's a 1993 movie by Steven Spielberg, and it was based on what we call non-fictional book called Cinderellas Ark by Thomas Keneally. So even Thomas Keneally, when he's writing this book, he's using the metaphor of ark. Noah's Ark metaphor is extended here, and here he is using the term Schindler's Ark. The way Noah saved uh, the species in his ark. Schindler saved the, I think, Polish Jews in his ark. That is, he enrolled them as a kind of workers, and that's why they were not sent to the camps. And the second one is Zero Dark 30 by Catherine Bigelow. It's a 2012 film, and it is a film about the what we call capturing of Osama bin Laden from Abbottabad. Now, both these events, the Polish Holocaust and the capturing of uh, Osama bin Laden, both these events really happened. But then, how these events are represented on screen? Are they just talking about those specific hours when the Osama bin Laden was captured and killed? Or there is something to it? Or in Schindler's List, are they just talking about just enlisting those Jews who can work and who are not sent to the camp? No. Both these films are again certain forms of documents that gives us a very interesting look into the background history of those events. Okay. As we were discussing about stories, that you can't just make a film directly from the story, you require to give some background. Here, the events are there, and we are basically talking about making a film about those events, but again, we need to provide the background for our audience. Schindler's List tries to document the entire event of saving Polish Jews from Holocaust. The film is also made in sepia shade, giving it a documentary mise en scene. That S- Spielberg is not making a kind of color film because he's making this film in 1993. So all sorts of colors were available. Still, he decides to make this film in sepia shade because that shade gives us the impact of documentary, the capturing of real events. And he wanted uh, the audience to remember that whatever you are seeing, okay, that actually happened. It is not fictionalized. Okay, so there were only few sequences where you could see red color highlighted. Otherwise, the entire film is in sepia shade, black and white. Okay. Because that idea of documentation was very powerful even in creating this kind of feature film. What was the what we call mindset of Oscar Schindler and the person who is working for him? What was the mindset of those Nazi officers when they were there in Polish Holocaust time? So all those things are shown in details, and there are certain actions shown that uh, we will know about those characters based on those actions. Similarly, Zero Dark 30 was based on real life events of capturing Osama bin Laden. It introduces a fictional character. See, the entire what we call project or the capturing, their planning, identifying where Osama is living. Okay, it was a long process, and there were many people involved. So in the movie, the CIA intelligent analyst Maya Harris, this character was fictional, and she is the main character of the film. Okay. In real life, in actual process of capturing event, there was no Maya Harris. This character was invented for the sake of the script. Okay. So they like multiple people, multiple analysts, multiple what we call army officers were working together to do this, but it would mm, not it would not appear good or not appear or film like if you have so many different protagonists doing different things. So probably for that reason, the director decides to uh, create a kind of fictional character who is doing all those activities that these different CIA people have done. Okay. And she is a female. And what is interesting, her name is Maya, that is illusion. So, in spite of having the what we call background of the real life events, and in spite of having almost all the minute documentation of those events, the filmmakers create or select or make some choice where their creative what we call creative choices and presenting the narrative in a specific way from a specific perspective comes. So director enters with those characters, with those choices. Okay, and it becomes a film and not a documentation. Both the films are claimed to be from real life events, and you'll find a lot of information which is primarily based on real life, but both of them treated the events very differently, and both of them used different level of what we call fictionalization in the film. Then adaptations from comics, this is one area of adaptation which is in terms of box office the most successful type of adaptation. Comics and mangas are two literary types which are very popular and very successful in present day adaptation. Okay. Say, for example, movies from the comics are some of the most popular films in today's time. You have the Avengers series, you have X-Men series, you have Transformer series, you have Batman series, Justice League series are all based on various comics. And these are some of the most successful movies of our time. If you check, let's say, box office of last 20 or 25 years, especially in terms of Hollywood, then the most what we call uh, films that have done amazing box office business, okay, are basically based on comics. These adaptations may be based on pure comic remake to attract the fan followers of the comic series. Okay. For example, if we follow the Avengers, all the different movies, like there are around 28 movies, if I'm not wrong, in the Avengers series. Okay, so that is the entire universe of Avengers. Similarly, you also have this X-Men series, X-Men universe. You have Transformer universe. So this latest Transformer, Rise of the Beast, like it got released almost like a month back. Okay. Now these are basically using the same comic narratives, and they are trying to commercialize the fan base of the comics. So basically, the comic is there, and it is simply converted into the film with very minimal changes. And good thing about comics is that the visual reference is also there. Okay, so then people discuss that the costume in the comic was better than the costume in the film. Okay, so that is the level of discussion you have with reference to these films. On the other hand, there are directors like Nolan, Snyder, Raimi, etc. They used comic narratives to develop a very specific philosophical concepts. Say, for example, if you go back to Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy, okay, again, he's using the Batman comics, but he's not creating a series of films for kids is raising very, very important philosophical issues. Or if you look at someone like Jack Snyder, who also made Justice League, who made Watchmen, okay, and he's also making some film which will be like yesterday I was reading a report that it will be what we call longest film in this particular universe. Similarly, Sam Raimi, who was once popular for making horror films like Evil Dead, who adapted the Spider-Man comics, and second and third Spider-Man were basically more popular for their philosophical narratives, and people still use those lines. That again, those lines are basically taken from comics, but given the importance to those lines and developing the entire narrative based on those philosophical statements, that's where they are different and they are making something new. Like if you look at the Dark Knight, I believe all of you must have seen Dark Knight. uh, Dark Knight questions the very idea of double face, because um, the Joker was considered double face, but Joker by definition is someone who cracks jokes. Okay. And similarly, when you there was this dialogue also in the movie that Joker always had the face of a Joker. It was not Joker, but the Batman who had double face. He had one life of being a Batman and another life of being the Bruce Wayne. So his social life and his what we call superhero life, they were all different. So the latest remake of Batman series basically tries to minimize the double face narrative of Batman, where Batman is mostly Batman and probably in one or two sequences only his Bruce Wayne. Watchmen is again in this film also the comedian is the most serious character, was made by Jack Snyder and was also based on comics. Logan again X-Men series, but then there this particular film, specifically Logan, was critically acclaimed because of the issues that the movie deals with. And there's a poster of Spider-Man 3 where the ego and alter ego of the Spider-Man, good and evil Spider-Man, were present, and there was that entire conflict about it. So, how you are approaching the comic, how you are approaching the narrative of the comic, that plays an important role. You can make like a movie like Avengers Endgame, which was shot for like within 30-40 days, but then its post production goes on for months. Okay. And they worry a very like they worry very little about the philosophical implications of what they are saying, and they concentrate a lot of time about the CGI and how fast spaced the film can be. Okay. While someone like Jack Snyder or uh, Christopher Nolan, when they are approaching the narratives, they basically identify the philosophical issues and they develop the narrative surrounding it. So the entire treatment of the movie will be from that philosophical perspective. Remaking, that is, adapting the old film. Okay. So there is some old film made in the past, and now you are creating a new film based on that same narrative. Many such films are available now, even like the same Spider-Man series. So there was this Tobey Maguire who was the Spider-Man. Then there was this other person, Garfield, Andrew Garfield mostly, who became the Spider-Man. Now you have some other Spider-Man. So like within 10 years, 15 years, you have different generations. So why they try to make new Spider-Man or new Batman in just span of 10 years? Okay. So that's where this new type of adaptation enters. The remakes are basically reworking on already existing films and making them again as per the requirements of new audiences. That in 10 years, you have a new generation of audience who may not be aware about the original film. So when you recreate it, the new generation of audience would know about it. Okay. Plus, when you are recreating it, you have newer technology. So you can make use of that technology and you can make a better narrative of that particular film. So the popularity, especially of the old movie, motivates the directors to adapt it. The director knows that certain film was hit, it has given good business, so it will, if it is remade, it will again give good business. There was one attempt to recreate the movie Sholay. Do you know? It was named as Ram Gopal Verma Ki Aag. And in this remake, uh, Gabbar Singh's role was played by Amitabh Bachchan himself. In original film, the heroine Basanti was Tange Wali, that she was running this horse cart, while in a modern version, she's driving an auto. Okay. And many such changes are made. But fortunately, unfortunately, that movie didn't work. Okay. If you had seen the movie, you would say fortunately it didn't work. Okay. So that's where there was an attempt to bring Sholay back for the new generation of audience, but it didn't work. So in case of rebooting of Spider-Man series or Batman series, etc., the new generation of audiences are targeted. Okay. At the same time, the making of the movie will also get benefit from the new technology, like they will convert it into 3D. Okay, so that there will be a new type of experience, and especially about these comics movies, they are not just restricted to comics. The comic based movies are actually creating their own market. There is comic, that is people read books. There are toys available based on those comic characters. There are clothes available based on those comic characters. There are all the different equipments available based on those comic characters. Then they will make film. They will earn from that also. Then they will also create a game out of it, and they'll also earn from it. So that fan following is what we call commercialized to the ultimate extent. Okay. So Spider-Man, every new Spider-Man basically comes after 8 to 10 years. So particular group of children will be grown up by then, and they would like to see the new target because they had seen the original or previous Spider-Man when they were very young. Okay, like my son who is 6 now, he had seen this No Way Home. Okay, but maybe when he is 15, there will be another Spider-Man with a new hero, and he would like to see it because he wanted to compare, or he would like to compare what he had already seen and what new type of Spider-Man is available. Like for most of us of my generation, we still think that the moment you say Spider-Man, we will start thinking about Tobey Maguire. Okay. So that is where we are basically using that idea of fan following. So there was this film by Howard Hawks, which was made in 1932 and was based on a novel by Armitage Trell called Scarface. And Scarface was very popular film of its time. Okay. So uh, in 1983, Brian De Palma recreates Scarface, and he uses one of the most talented and most celebrated actors of his time, Al Pacino, in the lead role. Okay, and both the Scarface, the 1932 one as well as in 1983 one, are considered a kind of classics, and both of them have a kind of cult status. If you remember, there was a movie by Anurag Kashyap called Bombay Velvet. So in that movie, he has used the intertextual references to Scarface. Okay. Because the character, the hero of that film, Ranveer Kapoor played that role. He had seen the movie Scarface 1932, and that's why he wants to become like that character. Okay. So there are a lot of references to this character of Scarface in Bombay Velvet as well. Similarly, all of us must have seen uh, different versions of Dawn. So Dawn 1, that is original Dawn, made in 1978 by that director was Chandra Barot. It was remade in 2006 by Farhan Akhtar, and both of them were very hit. They have done amazing business at the box office. Now, because the Dawn movie has been successful and has a particular fan following, there is yet another Dawn called Dawn 2, and it also did good business. So now the same producers and directors are thinking about creating Dawn 3. But then there is this discussion on who will be playing Dawn, because Shah Rukh Khan is not going to play that. So there is this name of Ranveer Singh for the title role. But see, the part of the importance of Dawn, 2006 Dawn, was because we knew 1978 Dawn. And many of us actually went to see that film because uh, we wanted to compare which one is better. Okay. And again, there are a kind of mixed opinions. Older generation always say that original Dawn was the best, while newer generations would say that this particular Dawn is very good. Okay. And that debate will go on because we have different perspectives. It's not about having a different kind of stories, about having a different perspective on it. Now, when we are thinking in terms of adapting from old film, it is a very, very risky business. Okay. As the film is inevitably compared to the original film. Whosoever is watching this, suppose I'm watching New Dawn or New Scarface, and if I know that there is another Dawn or another Scarface available, so I'll prefer to watch that also, because I want to develop that comparison. Okay. So there is always comparison with the original, and more than the audience, the critics and the analyst are comparing these films. So if the newer version is uh, weak in any sense, okay, then it will be a kind of post-mortem by these analysts. In majority of the cases, people prefer going to the original one. Okay, and that is again this matter of perspective of the audience, because they already know the original text. Okay, so they don't want to see the copy of a text, and that's why they prefer to watch the original draw. Adaptation from other languages. Okay, now these adaptations can be of different types. Okay, yeah, we talked about this film earlier. This is 2003 South Korean film directed by Park Chan-wook. It is known as Old Boy, which was unofficially adapted into a Hindi film by Sanjay Gupta in 2006. It is called Jinda. And then there is an official remake, American remake of the film in 2013, and it was directed by Spike Lee. So if you see these three posters, we can easily see the similarity among these three posters, though all three of them are from three different cultures and they are made into three different languages. The hammer is one constant thing. The dark shade was also something very, very constant in all three films. Okay, fine. So here, Old Boy has a kind of cult status. It actually brought the South Korean cinema and Park Chan-wook it a kind of global level. And Park Chan-wook also entered into Hollywood. He made films for American studios now. So, and there were a lot of things in Old Boy that as a movie lover you will cherish. Say, for example, there is this magical realism, a very unusual narrative, a very dubious kind of hero that is protagonist. Okay. And um, we all know what's happening, but we don't know why it is happening. Okay. So the narrative is like open to us, the audience, in a very slow but in a very systematic manner. It was a very good film, but when you watch something made in Hindi or something made in English, American film, will you have the same feeling in terms of approaching the text? If you haven't seen the original text, you will have a different understanding of the films adapted. But if you already know the original film and then you are watching these films, probably you will have a very different kind of interpretation. Okay, fine. S- The original Korean film has a lot of elements of magical realism, and that is something that made film very interesting. The film is about revenge, which is maintained in both the remakes of the film. Okay, in American as well as in Indian version, the concept of revenge is there. Okay. The original story has climax based on the idea of incest, but that incest is completely removed from the Indian version at least. And then Indian version has songs. There is a specific heroine other than the heroine which was already there in the original narrative. Okay. Okay. So all those differences that is created by Indian filmmaker or American filmmaker, they actually are changing the narratives because they want to fit that film, that narrative into the habitat of their own society. Film is again a text and it has to fit into the society or culture in which that text exists. If those films try to present something that is taboo in that particular society or which is something unacceptable in that particular society, um, then the text will not be accepted by the audience. Okay. And on top of that, they will also face backlash from the media as well as the certificating or agencies. So we move into some general observations. Okay. This is basically an image uh, from 1998 film called Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which was directed by Gilliam, and it was based on the book of the same title by Hunter S. Thompson. Okay, so again, you can see the characterization goes very similar to what is written in the book, and that's where they think in terms of authenticity. And even from the uh, poster, you can make out that film involves a lot of what we call substance abuse. Okay. and the novel was about it, and film remains more or less what we call loyal to that aspect. So what are the observations that we can have here? If we go by the rules of intertextuality, that is one text helping us interpreting another text, or some other text that we have read in the past is helping us in interpreting the text that we are reading or watching right now. In that sense of intertextuality, adaptation is not a new process. Okay, because we have been creating intertextual text from the very beginning of literature. Okay. When Milton wrote Paradise Lost, he's basically adapting biblical story. So his text, Paradise Lost, is intertextual to Bible. So that process of adaptation is not new in that sense. But the new medium in the process of adaptation is a new thing. That is, there was a written material, but we are changing the medium completely. We are changing the verbal signs into visual signs, into audio signs. Okay, that's where adaptation becomes a new process. But this medium also brings is experts in the entire adaptation process, because it doesn't medium doesn't come on its own. Medium comes with its expert. There are people who are masters of those particular mediums, how to use that medium and how to create based kind of text using those mediums. So that's where uh, the medium and the adaptation plays important role, and that's where we expect something new, something more creative, something more engaging in the adaptation process. Ultimately, adaptation is a reading of the director. So it is just a reading. Okay, just a reading. I'm making a film from a book. So that film is my reading of the book. It is just a reading. Same book, the same text can be reread by some other director in a very different way, because reading is a subjective process, and probably some other person who is reading that book differently will try to create completely different kind of text. Okay, like yesterday we were talking about that folklores adapted. So there is one very popular film from Gujarat released in 2019, if I'm not wrong, 18 or 19, called Hellaro, which was which wins the national award of the year. Now, Hellaro actually was based on a folklore, and the actual folktale uh, was about the caste, not about the women. Okay. Because there was that caste conflict in Gujarat a certain time. And this folktale was about that caste conflict, how the lower caste person was being harassed by the upper caste people. The entire story was about that class conflict. But when the movie Helaro was made, okay, the caste becomes minimal part of their narrative, because they had to take one untouchable character in the movie, or they had to create one untouchable character because it was a requirement of the narrative. Apart from that, there was no mention of the caste, and the entire movie becomes a movie about women, the women of the village. And the kind of conclusion they gave in the movie was not actually there in the folktale. So the same folktale, it has been like used and narrated multiple times and written by people, enacted by people, but When this movie is made, the narrative is completely changed, reread. It was reread from the perspective of the women of the village, not from the perspective of the untouchable. And that's where the narrative completely changes. Director's ideological bent and his or her connection with the text plays a very important role in this process. How does director engages himself or herself with the text that he or she is adapting, or with the text that he or she is creating? That is what we call ideological bent and the connection. Again, I give you the example of Heather. In the movie Heather, there were two characters. Basically, those characters are also taken from Hamlet. But here, these two characters are the fans of Salman Khan, and they are called Salman 1 and Salman 2. They are running this video parlor, and throughout the day, they are trying to imitate the accents of Salman Khan. Have you ever asked it why uh, someone like Vishal Bhardwaj decides to create these kind of uh, characters in his film? Okay, that's where this question of engagement comes, question of connection comes, because Salman Khan is basically epitome of what we call commercial cinema, as long as the Bollywood is concerned. And directors like Vishal Bhardwaj have been struggling between what we call commercial and parallel kind of cinema. So that's where he's commenting on that fan base of commercial cinema, because these Salmans in the movie are also not thinking for themselves. They were simply doing what their masters were asking them to do. They were also a kind of fans of some originally masters. So that's where uh, someone like Vishal Bhardwaj felt the need of making a kind of indirect comment on what we call celebrity culture in our society and in our film industry, which was not a requirement of the Hamlet, the drama. But this is something that director puts in terms of his own ideological position of what cinematic art is. Okay. Director has to work with the limitations and expectation of his medium. Limitation in the sense that you will have certain length, you will have certain types of representations possible. Okay. Right. So those limitations, and nowadays our censor board is very strict. So even if you show smoking, then you will have to put the badge on the screen. Okay. So those are the limitations. Plus expectation that you are making a film, investing millions of rupees, then there should be some business from the movies. There should be some advantage. So they also think about that how can we make a better or what we call better business from the movie. The time and point of view are two major limitations. Okay, the time dimension, first thing we have to consider, and from which perspective we are presenting. Okay, because our perspectivization are very minimal. Okay, we go into standard popular perspectives only. There are very few movies that question that standard perspective. And entertainment and business are two major expectations. The film should entertain the audience, and the film should do some business for the producers. The compromises made by the director are basically his or her creative choices. that considering all the limitations, okay, how the director prefers to present his or her idea, okay, through that particular film, or how the director presents his or her reading of the book through the medium of that particular film. In majority of the cases, these choices turns the director into an artist. What kind of choices the directors are making will tell us whether they are directors which are commercially interested in the movies, or they are the artist who wants to add something new to the cinematic art. So that's that. Whatever limitations we have, and within those boundaries, whatever choices we are making, we can still create some sort of art. But that depends the choices that we are making. Okay. Some general observations in terms of the audience as well. So I don't know how many of you have seen this particular film. It's called Hariputtar, a comedy of terrors, and it was released in 2008, made by Lucky Kohli and Rajesh Bajaj. Now, what is interesting is there is no connection with Harry Potter. It is just the name, but that name is taken in a way that it attracts the attention of the audience. Okay, so probably strategically they are using that name, that it will grab people's attention. So audience knows about Harry Potter. So that name is being replicated. For audience, adaptations has a very specific understanding. Many of them come to see the visual form of their favorite books. That is one very normal kind of expectation the audience has, that they have read the book and they come to see the film because they want to know how my favorite book looks on screen, or how the other people are reading the book that I was reading. Andre Bazin says that the cinema becomes a kind of guide for the original text. That by watching cinema based on a book, we understand the book better. That was the idea of Andre Bazin. And in fact, it is uh, also proved historically that whenever there is a film based on certain book, okay, after the release of the film, the sell of those books in the market increases. Okay, and that has been observed in many cases. So what Bazin was saying is in some sense correct, that people go back to the book after watching the film. He says that cinematic adaptation improves the popularity of the text. Okay, that people will come to know about those books, and they also try to read those books. Plus, as I mentioned about token and type yesterday, that there as many uh, tokens are there of the original work, the original work will become more valuable because more and more people have access to the tokens. So the type becomes important. Many times, audience receives a new interpretation of their favorite works. Like they have read the book and they have understood the book in one way, and after watching the film, they will have completely new understanding of the book. So they get a new interpretation because of the film. Adaptation also helps in presenting a long text into more approachable manner. A common man may not read a book of 300 pages, but it is highly likely that he or she will watch a film based on that book. Okay. Like as we were discussing yesterday, I we haven't read, let's say, 5 point someone, but almost all of us have seen Three Idiots. Okay, so that is what we are saying, that the message of the book becomes more approachable. Then adapted film for many viewers becomes a navigating stone towards the source text. That after watching film, they try to read the text to understand, or probably that film has impressed them, and that's why they want to read the original text. For academicians like us, okay, the adaptation process is very important to comprehend literature from different cultures, and can be a good guide to make sense of comparative literature, because there's a lot of cultural issues uh, seen in the process of adaptation, and that will enable us to understand the approach towards a particular literary text. Okay, because we know that how a particular culture will approach that text. Like as I said, in terms of Ravanan was a very big hit in South states, but when it was remade into Hindi and released in North India, it didn't work. So there may be some ideological or narratological issues related with the text that a particular group of audience is not ready to accept it. Okay. Okay. Because our acceptance is also based on our experiences and the texts that we already know. Okay. So I think that's all from my side. Thank you all.